Now, to talk all about what we know, where the future of this investigation will go, is security analyst Paul Viollis. So good to have you here, Paul.
Thanks, Marie.
Because I mean, you know all about this sort of thing. So, let's just start out with sort of the basics. What we know so far, when you heard about this shooting, what were some of the questions that started to come to mind for you?
Actually, the first thing that came to mind was this is just about a year ago when we were together covering the Las Vegas shooting, and it was surrounding a very similar type of demographic of individual or group, that being a very large country western musical affair. So that was the very first thing that came to mind. And the second part is then now also it was a large bar. So are we looking at another Pulse shooting? And did we actually have the shooter? So many things rush at that very first moment, as I'm sure with all of our viewers, and you see all this information. Clearly now that funnel has narrowed down considerably. So as opposed to at a point where a shooter has survived an incident, now with the shooter deceased, we're going to be looking at forensics and we're going to be looking at foreseeability.
So, Paul, stand by because we've got Carter Evans, our correspondent, who's on the ground there. He's going to join us, and just there he is. Carter, so you were also listening to that press conference. A couple of takeaways, Carter. I don't think anybody realized up until that moment where Sheriff Dean essentially said tomorrow he's retiring from the police force, that hero, Sergeant Ron Healis, was a great friend of his, that they worked out together. There are so many different aspects of this investigation that are going to, linger with people for a very long time.
Yes, this is very difficult for this sheriff. He was choked up at many times throughout the morning. He knew this sergeant very, very well personally. As for how they tracked down this gunman's identity, well, they found some evidence at the scene, and they were able to match that with his name. That led them to the house in Newbury Park, about 6 miles away from here. And I understand that they were trying to confirm his identity with a fingerprint, and it sounds like they were able to confirm his identity one way or the other, because that's how the sheriff was able to release his name. 28-year-old Ian Long. We know he was a former Marine. We know he's had run-ins with the law before, but mostly minor things, traffic infractions. He was the victim of an assault at the bar. Recently, though, at a bar, and recently, though, sheriff's investigators say police were called out to his home for some reason, and they brought out a crisis intervention team because he was irate. We know he is a former Marine, and there is talk of that he may have been treated or being treated for PTSD. But as far as his motive for the shooting, the massacre that occurred inside the bar last night, that's still unclear.
And so what do we know so far about what's this house in Newbury Park that it seems like police are searching?
I don't know too much about the house right now. I just know that it's not too far from here. He may have lived there with his mother. We're still trying to confirm that right now. But we do know investigators are at his house right now combing for more evidence.
Carter, there was something that Sheriff Dean mentioned. He mentioned that last April, as you pointed out, there was some kind of altercation. Mental health specialists arrived there to sort of take a look at him and talk to him, and that a 5150, they called it, was not secured. Now, for those of us in New York and across the country, explain what 5150 is.
Yeah, 5150 is the code that police officers use to describe a person who is essentially not in their right mind, who is not responding in normal ways, and that's to warn fellow officers who are coming about what they are about to encounter. So we're learning more about this individual, and hopefully from that we'll be able to learn what his motivation for this was.
Right. Carter Evans on the scene for us in California. Carter, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you a little later. Thank you. All right, so turning back to Paul now. Paul, so it's interesting because, generally when these sorts of things happen, people will say, look, there's an individual who may have had some mental issues. Now, of course, you mentioned something, and I forget the phrase that you used while we were listening to the press conference, because the shooting has already occurred. There's going to be a look back to see what kinds of signs were missed.
Exactly.
This 5150 was not secured. They felt that it wasn't necessary in this case. Will that be something that is taken a look at?
Rest assured, and I can tell you right now, Vlad, as sure as that we are sitting here or standing here right now, that's happening as we speak. And that's going to be closely scrutinized scrutinized as to how he got past the 5150. And for our viewers to understand, that is a very in-depth psychological analysis. And it looks to whether someone is a threat to themselves or to others. And it's a very, very in-depth look. Across the country, it's also known as a Baker Act, and various states call it a different thing, but it's the same thing. It also allows law enforcement or family members to involuntarily commit an individual for those two reasons. So when they say he cleared that, that speaks volumes to what they saw when they evaluated
It's not just a chat, right? That's what I first thought. It's just a chat. They talk to him. He seems okay. You move on. No, you're saying it's a...
Right. Normally it's 72 hours. Normally it's a 72-hour hold to assess whether or not this individual's a threat. You know, so, and there are a variety of reasons for that. There are a variety. So when they say he's cleared, you can be sure that's going to go, law enforcement's going to go back right now. They're going to look at that. They're going to interview everybody. And they just said the FBI's team from Quantico's coming. I can tell you right now, having done this almost 4 decades, that's my first stop. I'm going to take a look at that. No question about it.
What does the fact that he's a veteran, a former Marine, say to you?
Well, I think really, Anne-Marie, what that told me was when they said, and the account was when he came into the building itself. Marines are exceptionally well trained in building entry. So when he came in, they show him coming in, weapon up, and the first thing he did was go to the security guard to eliminate the force, right? Eliminate opposition. And then the second was to start looking across the room, as we were listening to the CBSN coverage earlier this morning, looking across the room as to where he was going to shoot. He was calculated. He used a smoke grenade in order to either cloud people, disorient people. We don't know exactly what it was. I mean, Vlad, your service, you know this too. It could have also been a flashbang, could have been loud to disorient and to keep people shocked. So he could have gotten a greater count when it comes to actually discharging the firearm. So when I heard that, it spoke tactical.
And what about this gun, this Glock 21 .45 caliber gun with the extended chamber? What kind of gun is it? How easy is it to maneuver? How easy is it to hide? It's
relatively simple. It's not that heavy and it's not that big. Having that 10-round magazine, the magazine, if you figure, is about this big. One in the chamber. When an extended magazine, as the sheriff was saying, there are a variety of extended magazines, so it could have been 15 shots or more. We don't know. And we also don't know at this point, Anne-Marie, if he had other magazines with him. They haven't disclosed that. That's part of the forensic part, as Vlad was asking earlier. That's part of the forensic part of this investigation, because we're going to look right now to see shell casings and to see if they're the consistent shell casings or were there shell casings from other weapons we don't know about at this point.
You know,